People are often surprised when I tell them that they can actually purchase an investment property with no money involved in the transaction, which is quite incredible. So there's two main circumstances under which this can occur. One is where people already own some property, and one is where they don't. So let's take a look at the first situation. The first situation is where people already have some equity in an existing property. Under those circumstances, with finance, that equity can be unlocked and utilized from that property and channeled into a new property. Typically, what we would look at doing is arranging a new loan that has the value of at least 20% plus the closing costs and holding costs for a new property, and unlock and utilize that in a new property. So under those circumstances, there'd then be another loan organised on the main new investment property of around 80%. So under those circumstances, as long as people have the sufficient income to be able to service both of those loans, then under those circumstances, we are able to structure a situation where 100% of the cost of the new property can be covered, as well as the closing costs like stamp duty and legals, as well as if, let's say, for example, we have a situation where it's the new investment property is a single family residence. And because of the higher interest rates we have these days, there may be circumstances where, because it's 100% funded, it's actually a little negatively geared. The expenses, the main one being the loan interest, is more than the money coming in from the rent. People may not want that money to come out of their pocket, in which case we can basically do a forecast of how much that'll be over the first, say, 1 to 2 years, and add that to the financing as well, because over that time the rent probably has grown to a point where when that money's used up in interest, then the property would be by then neutrally geared and able to pay for itself while growing in value. So that's the first circumstance, where someone already owns a property and they're tapping into that lazy equity that's sitting there to help grow their wealth by using it to tap into a new property. What could be used with the money that they actually grow out of that? One of the things that people are using that money for, let's say that property's grown significantly in value over the next, say, 5, 6 or 7 years. And remember, they didn't put any money in out of their own pocket. They can use the capital growth after they've paid a little bit of tax to really pay off a huge lump sum on their principal residence, which is fantastic. Now, the second circumstance where someone could look to buy a new property without any money down is where they don't own a property at the moment. However, it's one where they have access to some equity in another property. So let's imagine that potentially you're a person and your parents have potentially a couple of investment properties. They've owned them for a long time. There's a lot of lazy equity sitting there doing nothing. The mechanism or the financial instrument that's used, or the financing technique that's used, is called family pledge. And that's a situation whereby a bank will allow for a limited amount to be mortgaged over the existing family property, and that's basically sufficient to provide the deposit and the costs for the people without the deposit to be able to go and purchase a property in their own names. Now, the two caveats with this is that because under basically the lending system here in Australia, everyone will need to be involved with the loan normally, and so there needs to be a benefit there. So the parents probably are going to have some equity in the new property, but normally that's fine in terms of achieving what needs to be achieved. And the second thing that can happen is that once that new property has grown in value, then the limited mortgage over the other property can be released when that new property has grown in value to cover whatever was borrowed in that regard. Let's imagine there was a mortgage on the existing property of $100,000, for example. Well, when the new property has grown in value by that much over the following, say, 3, 4, or maybe 5 years, once that's occurred, it's revalued, and then on the basis that the loan isn't any more than, say, 80% of the value of that new property, the existing property can be released, and hey presto, those people have managed to get involved in a new property of their own with no money down. And once again, it's just a mechanism that not everyone's aware of that's available here in the Australian banking and housing system. If you'd like to know any more information about either of these styles of investing, whether it be the 100% borrowing with an existing property or without one, then by all means DM me, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have in this regard. Thanks for that. And just finally, wanted to remind you, this is not financial advice because we don't know your personal circumstances. But if you'd like to discuss them, then by all means reach out, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.